The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. It's going to be showcasing Project One, our latest product for project management. Once again, thank you for joining. And today is going to be a deeper dive into Project One. Going to have it's going to have a little bit of a recap from previous webinars and maybe some overlap as well. But I'll be showing you some new things as well, and a couple of features and steps on how to do things within Project One. So again, thanks for joining. I'm going to get started here. Before I get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about DevSuite and Project One. So there's a lot of questions on what is the difference between the two. So I'm going to go into DevSuite first and kind of show you the project structure. So this is where the recap happens a little bit. Here we have our project hierarchy. So we have our requirements module, we have our development module, then finally our test case library, as well as the test execution side of things. And then within it, if I click into the requirements module, for example, I would create projects over here on the left-hand side. So here I got a couple of these projects on the left-hand side. Similarly, I would have to do the same thing in development. So you can kind of see there's another project there. And then finally, inside the test library, I would do the same thing. So it's kind of tedious. You would have to create the same project folder multiple times within DevSuite. You can kind of tell the interface is a little bit outdated, but it's still extremely feature rich. There's a lot of features and functions that you can do within DevSuite. But this is where Project One comes in. So I'm going to show you Project One. So Project One takes a different approach. On the home page, what you're looking at will be your list of projects. So instead of flipping by, the different modules, requirements, or development or testing, you actually do a more natural approach of just clicking into your project. So here I have two sample projects. One's for simple task tracking. The other one's an actual development project that includes all the modules. So let me show you the difference real quick. And as you can tell, the interface is a lot cleaner, a lot newer. So it should be easier to work with. So this is our development sample project here. And within it, so I can flip between the different projects, but within it, I would have all the different modules listed. So again, instead of the other way around where I'm going into each module first and then picking my project, I actually just need to go into my project and then I can highlight or go into whichever module I work with, right? So it's much more intuitive in that sense. There's also an ability to um, set up the projects. So in DevSuite, how this would look like would be kind of you right-clicking on the properties of a folder and kind of configuring these items in terms of the dates, in terms of the linking between the projects, things like that. But inside here, all you have to do is click on Setup. It's super intuitive to add users as well. There's a little bit of a web admin within Project One that you don't get inside DevSuite. DevSuite, as you guys are all aware, uses a Windows client to configure everything. So we're slowly getting all of those features, all that configuration settings over into Project One. But some of the basic things that you can do is um, for any project, you can determine which modules you want to enable. So I have all of our different modules from management all the way down to testing. So these are enabled for our development project. And then I can also add users here as well. So I can create a brand new user or add existing users that maybe belong into the requirements module, but not the test case library, right? So I can add these guys and kind of determine which modules they have access to. So it's a lot more easier to manage. And then finally, if I go into my user profile here and I go into the admin, then there's a little bit more that you can do within these projects. So over here, I have all of these different modules again, but I can configure the workflow for them, and I can configure the fields and the layout. Then there's some advanced settings like email. rules that you can set up within here. So we're slowly getting these features, these settings migrated over into Project One, so it's more um, organized and it's easier to use in general. Um, I'm going to speak a little bit about this field and layout portion here. So today I'm going to be showing you Project One Standard. There's another edition, the Enterprise Edition, which actually allows us to have custom fields. So today, as of now, we have actually a couple of customers that we're working with. We have their databases and we're kind of evaluating, we're kind of testing for them to make sure all their fields and things like that appear in the Enterprise Edition. So if you're interested in that, just let us know. We'll work with you. We'll get a copy of your database. We'll ask our QA teams to evaluate, and we'll put up a cloud environment for you to access once it's ready to go. So you can always see um, your data using Project One. Lastly, Project One actually sits on top of DevSuite. So I'm going to close this admin here. So I have abcsoftcloudp1.com here. This is the same thing, but it's the DevSuite portion of it. So as long as you have a DevSuite system, you can always add Project One on top. Okay, so they coincide, they work together concurrently, or you can use Project One standalone or DevSuite standalone. I would say if you're an average user and you're just tracking things, you're entering data, Project One is going to be a lot easier to use. If you're an advanced power user and you need to do a whole mess of reports and things like that, then I would still stick with DevSuite. So they could be worked or used together concurrently. Okay, going back into the homepage here, the list of projects here, we have one more concept on the top here. So this layer right here, the project base family, you could think of it as just, I don't know what the base is for, but you could think of it as just a family of projects. So here, this is not a very good example, but let me show you our internal system real quick. I have that up, and I'm going to be flipping between my sample system and our real environment. So we use Project One on a daily basis, and we find it pretty useful, pretty easy to use. But here, we have our divisions as project families. So if you're one of those organizations that's, uh, multifaceted, you have different divisions, things like that, then you may perhaps create a project family like we have here. So I have the US teams, which, operate completely differently than our China teams. So our China teams are working on different projects versus our US teams. So therefore, we created two different families. And if I go into each of these, I'm actually a power user, so I have access to both. But if I go into each of these, I should see a list of projects that belong within the right division. So that's the project family concept. I'm going to move this away. Coming back into here, so I only have one family here. There's a template that you can always use to get started with. I think in our sample environment, we're going to remove that. It's only going to say project management. But for now, the other guy right here is the um, is a non-development project. So it's simply just task tracking in general. So you can kind of see when I come into this project, um, I only have a task tracking module. There's no development, there's no requirement. In fact, there's no testing, anything like that. So it's a very straightforward project just for task tracking purposes. So whatever you need to track, you can kind of use, something like this. So if I go to P1, I'm going to show you how to get started here. So if I go to a new project here, I can enter in a project name. So I'm going to just call it a new project for now. And this is where you would put in, this project as, which family that it belongs into. Then I have, here a development project versus a simple task tracking project. So kind of show you the difference. I'm going to go into development here. I'm going to hit next, and here's where I get to enable all these modules. Okay, so I know some of us, only use or only have access to, these, development module or just the test library and the test run. But in the future, you can always enable this as long as you have the license to do so. There's a knowledge base as well. So you get all of these different modules for a development type of project. So if I hit back here and I do task tracking, and I hit next, then that list becomes a little bit smaller. In fact, I'm just doing simple task tracking, but if I wanted to add requirements to it, I can do so, and that's about it. So it's not too much to it. It just limits the number of modules that appear here, and simplifies things a little bit. So you can kind of see by me clicking around, it's very intuitive and it makes a lot of sense. More so than NetSuite, it's a lot easier to operate. A couple different, smaller steps to do to create these modules, add modules, and things like that. So it's a lot easier. Lastly, this import option basically is for our existing customers where they already have either requirements, or development or testing. They can actually just import those right into a family. So that's what that import option is for. You click on your existing project, and then you insert that project into this list. Okay. Going back into the simple task tracking project, over on the left-hand side, this is our familiar project tree. However, this works a little bit differently. So here I have my project as the highest layer, but then I have my planning. So I think this, task tracking project is just to plan out a company holiday party. You can kind of see the different folders underneath to organize this a little bit better for our planning. So we can create as many folders as we need to group all of these things together. So over on the right-hand side will be all the tasks that we need to do, that we planned for. And then finally down below would be the actual execution of those tasks. So on the top, you have the planning. On the bottom, you have the execution. What I mean by that is traditionally we move things around, and by doing so, you actually lose the location of where the task or where the story originated from. So if we wanted to keep these tasks at the same location, so if I go to venue, traditionally what we did was we moved these out of this folder into a sprint, and then we lose the planning part of it, right? So in this case right here in task tracking, all this is going to be on the execution side of things would just be a shortcut to whatever we have in the planning phase. And so if I go into sprint one here, and right now it's grouped by different owners, different individuals that we need to assign these tasks to. But let's get rid of that for a second. So let's do it by status. And let's go ahead and get rid of that. So right here we have our traditional storyboard where we have our workflow statuses as columns. But here's what we can do. So all I have to do is click on something like this. This task board folder ID. I think we're going to change that label. But we just need to click on that and say assign, and I'm going to go ahead and take that and assign to sprint one. So by doing so, I'm not actually moving this task, out of this folder. It's still in the planning folders, but now I get to see that task over in the sprint side of things. I may not have, chose a status, so it's probably not appearing for me. But that's how it works. So for us, internally, let me show you guys this. Let me navigate to something that we do. So our marketing department actually uses this portion. Since it's not a development project or anything, um, we find this to be extremely useful. So let me show you how that is. This is some real data here. This is our marketing for this year. But over here, we have all of these different departments for management. So we have all of our different teams. We plan out all these different tasks, maybe update our IT infrastructure, maybe update our marketing campaigns and things like that. And then we start assigning them out, and we do every 2 weeks sprints. So we're assigning these out to these sprints. As as a matter of fact, I'm part of this group here, and I can see all these tasks that I'm adding as part of this process. So we still keep track of the tasks, and the planning portion of it. But then over here on the sprint board here, we're able to see the execution side of things. Okay, so that's what a simple task tracking would be for a non-development project. And I know a lot of us do that. Not all of our projects are, for developing a product and things like that. So having said that, that's what that module is for, the management module or the task tracking module. Okay, so that's as easy as it gets. There's not much to it. You got your planning portion, then you have your execution portion. Okay, I'm going to flip over now to product development. So over here, again, we have our management layer. So this management layer is optional. It's basically something very high level for our managers. Maybe if you want to, plan out your resources, maybe you want to do some capacity planning, things like that. Um, at a very, very high level, then you would use this management module. But the way it works is um, you would have stories right here, and then you would have underneath that all these different tasks. So these guys right here are very different than, let's say, your development stories and your development tasks. It's just purely for management purposes. And the way I would create this is up on the top, I have this new icon here. This guy right here, new work, and I think we need to relabel some of our stuff, is actually a new initiative or a new goal for this management team. So if I click on new work right here, um, I can say, let's run a new email marketing campaign. Right? So that's our goal with the purpose of, getting 50 leads or something like that. Okay, so I can put it in the description. I can put in a start date and an end date, do all of that, hit OK here, and then now I'm able to create, additional tasks underneath to make this happen. So our initiative, our goal is on the top. We create as many tasks as we need to accomplish that goal. We can then assign it to individuals and then assign it out to our execution side of things. Okay, so it looks very, very similar to our development module, but again, it's not for development purposes. It's just for our management team. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that right now. And hopping over to requirements, um, over here on the left-hand side is very similar to DevSuite. So, how I look in DevSuite, if I flip over here, I have my time tracker application. Then underneath, I have these folders. I can create as many folders as I need to. Similarly, the same thing is done here. So you can, right click, you can create as many, child folders or sibling folders, things like that, as you need to. But again, this is where you're breaking down these high level requirements. Okay, so things that are in this green icon would be high level requirements, maybe from a customer, maybe from internal teams, but these are things that you want to build out into your product. Then underneath it, we're breaking it down into a smaller set of specifications. Okay, so here we got ability. This is a feature that we want to set up user roles, and the spec will actually tell us how we can do that, right? Or how we should implement that. So we can create as many specs as we need to, very similar to how DevSuite is. So in DevSuite, you would just do new as child, and then you fill out this form, and it's already linked to a parent. Same thing here. I would just click on this guy right here. I hit new, and then you can kind of see I can choose my whether this should be a spec or another requirement. And you can have custom types too. But these guys drive the look and feel of this form. But I'm gonna go ahead and do something like this. Add a button here on this page. Okay, so I'm gonna do something very easy. Go ahead, put it in the description, and then that's it, right? So then now who's going to be responsible for that? I'm going to say, well, maybe this guy is. Okay, then I could put in a start date and an end date. But here I'm going to show you a little bit about our other product, our cloud product, where we make our lives a little bit easier in terms of describing our requirement. So here I'm going to go ahead and click on, let me just go ahead and find something. Uh, let's see if I have something here. I don't even know if I do. I should have a lot of documents around here somewhere that I want to put in. Maybe this guide right here, this requirement right here. Okay, I hit OK, and it's gonna actually upload into cloud. I should have an icon here. Let me see if it's doing it. Let me go ahead and click on something again. Okay, and then I hit OK. It's kind of not working today. Okay, no worries. So if I hit OK there, maybe I do have something that is working. But here's my, here's a specification. Here's an attachment. I can click on play here. Well, okay, so my demo environment's not properly working today. But essentially what you're doing is you're putting attachments, you're putting requirements in. And let me go ahead and show you how that looks like um, inside our cloud environment. So all of those attachments get uploaded. Well, actually, it did upload. So it gets uploaded into your cloud accounts. And this one will actually be under our requirements module. So if I click on requirements, I should be able to see everything I attach. But the purpose of this guy is not just for document storage. Um, it does a little bit, actually a lot more than that. So from here, I can actually open up the document and I can create what we call syncs, right? So, oftentimes I'm describing or I'm writing this documentation down, but it gets lost in translation. So what that means is if I wanted to share this with a team, that's not within the US, right? And we have a language barrier, then perhaps we can use, this feature to actually describe this document a little bit more. So here I can go ahead and highlight things. I could do annotations. I can do all of that, and I could record all that. And I can in fact do syncs, what we call syncs. So I can go ahead and create a new sync here. And essentially what it does is it actually records your voice and all the actions that you're performing against this document. So I'm going to say new sync. I'm going to record a sync here, and it's recording now. So it should be recording, whatever I'm saying right now as part of this document. Um, and then when I'm done, I hit finish here. So that sync gets added on top of this document. So now this document becomes a lot more alive, a lot more powerful to describe, to get a better understanding of your requirement that you added um, as part of that specification, right? So here you can create as many syncs as you need to, and if I go back here into my list right here, it'll tell you how many syncs you created, right? So here I got one sync, but you can click on multiple versions, different syncs, and you can kind of see what everyone's talking about. So in terms of describing your specifications or requirements and whatnot, this is extremely useful, extremely powerful. So here I'm in a different interface and I'm clicking on that document, right? Similarly, my syncs should appear here too. So if I click on this document and there's multiple syncs, I should be able to see that. Okay, so now that's a different product than ProjectOne. It's integrated right now with our cloud product for that purpose. There's a lot more to cloud. There's collaborations. Actually, I'm missing something here. Against this document, I could actually not only create these little syncs, these little audio clips with annotation, but I could easily start a meeting with anybody. So here I can create a meeting against any document and then start inviting users, kind of like GoToMeeting or WebEx or Zoom or what have you. But all of that you're doing is all captured, you know, on this document itself. And if you attach this document to a specification or a requirement, you can easily see all the conversations that you ever had regarding the specification. So we find this extremely useful, especially when we're communicating with our overseas teams. Um, Lastly, here we also have the ability to do images. So if I click in here and I wanted to, screenshot an image and add it to my description field here, I'm able to, just copy and paste, put that in there. But on images, not just documents, but images or even other media like videos, we're able to do the exact same thing. We're able to create syncs against a video or against images. And I find that, even more powerful than just documents. Okay, so just know that that cloud product will bring you that functionality. But I'm going to hop back into this guy, into ProjectOne. So um, I just clicked on, well, depending on where you click, you might see the data in different views here. So everything always appears on the right-hand side. That's a little bit different than DevSuite. DevSuite appears at the bottom. It's a little outdated, but this is much more modern. So this is what I mean by ProjectOne standard, where we have, just our standard fields, our standard system fields, title, description, plan start date, end date, things like that. So it's very, um, there's not too much data that's being captured. So if you're one of those customers, again, that have a lot of custom fields, just reach out to us. We'll configure the system for you. We'll make sure those custom fields appear in your version of ProjectOne. So it's a lot cleaner here. I have my links, right? So whether or not these guys are linked over to development, whether I have, a test case even associated with it. If not, I can go ahead and create that. But it's very, very intuitive. A lot more so, I would say, than DevSuite. Okay. The other view that I want to talk about real quickly was if I click on, the ID itself, then I get a pop-up layer. So it's a lot more space for you to work with. In fact, we have comments that we can add to it. This is something that DevSuite is kind of missing. Pretty soon we'll have, live chatting available. Actually, speaking of live chat, that is available with the cloud product here as well. So I can, easily chat in real time against any document or hold a meeting and things like that. So everything we're doing here is captured. So it's a collaboration tool, I would say, and it should increase your productivity. Okay, so coming back into here, I think that's all there really is to our requirements module. Okay, so organize your requirements and your specifications, break down your high-level requirements into specs. Then finally, at the end, we can assign this out to development. So how do we do that? If I flip over to the development module real quickly here, on the left-hand side, this is not organized by components like our requirements module is, right? But this is more organized by time. So here what I have is different milestones. I have release 1, release 2, then maybe if you're agile, you can go ahead and add different sprints to it. Okay, you can add, additional sprints, or if you aren't really agile, you still want to follow your traditional methodologies, then you could just create regular folders. This is purely optional. But here, I would recommend, highly, highly recommend that you start using sprints, whether it's 2 weeks, whether it's a month. But I would just use this concept in general because Project One will give you a lot of functionality against sprints. So here I have my release 1. Sprints 1 and 2 are in the past. They're in red. Sprint 3 got a green icon. This guy right here is done by weeks. The blue icon represents a future sprint that hasn't started yet. And the way you would do that is, or just basically put a time against this. So if I hit edit here, you have a start date, you have a finish date for this sprint. By default, ours is 2 weeks, but that's how we can know whether or not this is a current sprint or a future sprint, right? Okay, so having said that, again, on each of these sprints, or let's not even talk about the sprints yet. If I click on a milestone, I'm able to see a list of my tasks that I need to do. But there's another layer above right here. So this will be all the specifications that I brought over from our requirements. But let's say you're not using the requirements module, you still have this functionality. You can call them standalone stories if you want, but they don't necessarily have to come over from the requirements module. They're optional as well, but I would highly recommend you use that because you can create all these different tasks against a story. So hopefully you can see that there's a parent-child relationship here. But again, you can use standalone stories. You don't have to necessarily use our requirements module. I know a lot of us that are in this call today, simply are just using DevTrack or our development module, but you have that capability. Coming back in here, again, if I expand on any story or any specification that I carried over, I have my children task. And this one right here is how we can simplify our development workflow. So if you notice here, each one of these are very specific tasks that need to be done by a specific individual. So the ownership doesn't really change as you're completing these tasks because I'm breaking that workflow down into different tasks, right? So here I got to do documentation. Here I got to do unit testing. I got to actually implement this in my mobile app. I got to do this, in my web, interface, things like that. So that's all done by different individuals. Whereas traditionally, you would actually maybe build this out into kind of a waterfall workflow where, you have, your design, then you implement it, and then you would change the status to unit test, things like that. So I'm breaking actually those steps down into different tasks to different individuals. And what that allows me to do is, if I go into a sprint, so this is a little bit different than our traditional, storyboard. We still have that. So if I go to statuses and I'm not grouping by any owners, I'm able to see all these different tasks. I can move things around to different statuses. But that allows me to actually see a workload. So if I flip over back and I have my individuals listed, my team members listed for this particular sprint, I'm able to see their workload, right? I'm able to see how many tasks are assigned, and if you decide to use points against these tasks, um, you can totally see that, right? So let's do an example here, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and take these guys right here and maybe say move to this guy to sprint 3, something like that. Okay, so now if I go into sprint 3, here we go. So I have some tasks, and you can kind of see their workload starts increasing, right? And the way we determine the workload, real easy. We have, a duration for the sprint. All we have to indicate, for any individual is how many hours or what's their capacity for the sprint. So if they're working 100%, then, well, it's real easy. 8 hours per day, right? Then you would have, 40 hours, then you can easily determine the workload because you're on each of these tasks, you're either putting in, how much time is remaining, right? And how much time is spent, things like that. So if you use this guy right here to calculate against capacity, you therefore have your workload. It's a real straightforward formula, nothing complicated there. But this is how you would actually work through your daily tasks, right? So you can come in here and you can easily do time entry here. So right now, our estimate says it's about 8 hours that we got to do, or she needs to spend about 8 hours for this unit testing. I think that's a little bit out there, but we're gonna go ahead and reduce that to 6 hours because I'm gonna go ahead and put 2 hours in, and then this is optional right here. You get to select a type that you're spending. If you don't enable that, then you're just punching in 2H, and that's that, right? So now I got my time spent entry in there. I can easily click on it. I can see, all the effort that's being put on to this particular task. So as long as they're entering in time, we can do a lot of things with this. We can do burn down reports. We don't necessarily have to use time. We can use points instead. But you get a lot of reporting out of this. So there's a lot of estimates versus actuals that you can calculate based on these time entries. So this is, not a new feature that's in Project One, but it's a lot easier to do in Project One. So definitely has its functionality, but it's a lot easier inside Project One. Now I'm gonna get a little bit advanced on you guys here, so I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the requirements module, and let me show you guys one thing here. Um, Over here, to customize my list view here, and in any module, it doesn't matter where you are, you click on this little setting icon, you customize the list fields, and you're able to drag whatever field you want into the list view, okay? So I've already done so, and you'll see this point column that I can add, and this guy right here actually helps me um, helps me assign out or product owners to assign things out to development more easily because these are my estimates. Okay, so what I'm doing here is ability to set user role here. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to show you right here. I could say as a product owner, I think that this requirement or this specification is going to take 20 points for this particular module. Let me show you a live system how this would look, okay? Because my data here is just terrible, and I apologize for that. So let me come into our internal system. This is one of our projects that the China team is building, but they do something very, very similar here. So if I click on here, and let me go ahead and add that, and I should be able to, I should have that point system here. Okay, so let me move that up because my screen is getting cut off here. I should probably just refresh my screen. But right here, my point system. So I'm going to click on this real quick. I'm pretty sure I have a lot of data here. So let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so here, these are what I mean by the modules right here. So to implement this particular spec, we know we have to do it in Android and iOS and web. Maybe on the server side of things, we gotta do things. So I can go ahead and allocate points. Okay, so what I'm saying here is I think it's going to take 20 points to build this out in Android, maybe another 20 to build it out in iOS, and maybe another 10 points to build out in the web. So I can do my estimates like this. I can say and it's broken down by modules, right? So overall, this spec is going to take me 50 points to do. Okay. Then from here, I can, so right here, you got the 50 points. Then you can click on, assign to development. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on this right here. Whoops. And I wish my screen wasn't cut out here. So I'm going to assign to development. And right here, let me go ahead and do that. So assigned to development just means I'm bringing this over to a sprint, right? Into a sprint that's, maybe existing or not. Let me go ahead and refresh this entire thing because I think by me changing my resolution, this guy got a little bit messed up. So let me do that one more time. So assigned to development. Okay. So here I can say, um, this web module, I'm assigning it over to this person, and that person's going to use maybe 5 points or maybe 10 points of the allowed capacity. So that's how we can get our estimates versus actuals. Let me show you guys the result of this. Okay, so if I come into the development module, for every one of these sprints, I should have a summary page right here. So if I view the report here, I have my burn down reports, I have my workload reports and things like that. But I can easily see per individual how much time they spent, how much time is remaining, how much, what the number of finished tasks. But the system is able to, based on those figures, based on those estimates, based on those points, the system is able to automatically calculate a performance score for each individual. So this is kind of how we adjust our bonuses and whatnot, by letting the system auto-calculate these things. The number of finished points, the number of task points that are completed, and then finally, the efficiency would be those points that I mentioned. But together, there's a formula here. If you really are interested in this, you can easily click on the legend and see how we actually auto-calculate. But this report I find extremely useful because we can kind of see how the team or the individual is doing overall. Okay, I'm going to speak a little bit about this little ding piece right here. So this guy really has a negative connotation. This basically means that somebody can't reach you. Okay, so there's a little bit of time tracking that's inside our development module now. So in project one, inside development, if I go back into my storyboard here, you'll see that there's a red icon, an indicator here, right? So coming in here, you have, if you highlight any of these guys right here, I need to make sure I find the right date. Today's the 18th, right? You'll have a start date that you can log. So let me go into our system because it's kind of hard to see where this is. So you can kind of see inside here, if I go into my execution right here, you'll see that in real time, these are the people that are currently available right now. Okay, and these are the people that haven't logged in yet. And the way we do that is kind of like a time card. So you can log in your start date right here. You just click on it and you hit login. And then when you're done, for the day, you can click log out. By any given moment, I'm able to go to a different individual and I'm able to ding them. Let's say I can't find them. Okay, so, and that's a request to reply feature. So I can go ahead and click on this, and then I could ding them, and that has a negative connotation on it. But essentially, you're putting a message in, and you're saying you can't find that person. Okay, and so that actually affects your performance in a negative way, right? So the system can actually do all of this, calculate your efficiency, your productivity, your availability, and things like that. So that's all within, that's all new in Project One, and it's something that we added only for the purpose of how, all of our teams are remote now. Nobody's in the office, and we just need to be able to track where people are, how to reach out to people and things like that. It makes our lives a little bit easier. It's very easy to do. You basically log in every day, put your tasks in, things like that. Okay, so enough of that. Let's go into the test library. Test library today is the same as Dev Suite. It's identical. Okay, so here I'm breaking down my test library. I have my different test cases. They're organized kind of like my requirements into different components, right? And then you can, again, create as many folders as you need to. But if I'm looking at a template here or a test case, these could be renamed if you want. But a template in our case would just be a test case. I think everybody knows that. Our test procedure, real simple, text field. If you use verification points today, and what that means is if you use steps to verify things, right? Those verification points become listed here as well. So it's there's pretty much the same thing as what you had before inside DevSuite. So there's not much to this guy right here. I can of course go back to my requirements module, go to my linking and create test cases for anything that doesn't exist in my test library, right? Any requirements that I built out that's not here. The more interesting piece would be the test run, the execution side of things. So coming in here, we have our different releases. And I think we all know this. Underneath, we have different test cycles for a release. But the operation of this is a lot easier to do, in my opinion, than DevSuite. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how this is done. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a new release. I'm going to go ahead and hit release 6.0. I'm going to hit OK. You can put it in the description what this release is for. And that's it. So there's no wizard to this, right? So basically, we got rid of that wizard. And I find that wizard kind of annoying when I have to do it for every release. But in fact, that wizard just sits over here on the cycle level now. So we can choose to either do what we call a permutation grid. This is something that's new inside ProjectOne. Or we can do no permutation, which is what everybody's using today, but I'm going to show you the difference between the two. So permutation grid. So I'm going to go ahead and call this test cycle 1. I'm going to hit next. And here I'm selecting the environments to be tested. So I find this, to be this interface to me is just a lot better. So I'm going to say for this particular test cycle, I want to test against Android and iOS and maybe these different browsers, Firefox and Chrome. And that's it, okay, for this particular test cycle. I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to select a combination of these two variables. I'm going to hit next, and in here I just find where my test cases are sitting at. So maybe I want to do the entire product, or maybe I just want to do a certain component of it. But in either case, I'm going to go ahead and either finish, and that defines the scope, or I can add my task now. So these are the test cases that I found that have those environments applicable for. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, if you have these other modules that you're using today, like requirements, or maybe even development, you can certainly use this option instead. So you can find which requirements you want to test. As long as they have test cases against them, a link to them, then you can easily filter out these test cases by requirements instead, or maybe by your test your previous test tasks or your defects that are sitting in development. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next here, and this permutation grid is exactly that. It's a grid that has my variables listed right here on the top, right? So I have my Android, Firefox, Android and Chrome, iOS, and over here on the left hand side are my test cases. Then I just go ahead and select that. And I think I could punch in Control A to highlight everything, but I can hit apply, and these are just it's gonna go ahead and create those tasks for me, right? And you can kind of tell this should be much faster than how DevSuite does it. So this is how a grid looks like. Again, I have in the middle column right here, I have my test cases. On the right hand side, I have my different variables, combination of them, and then all of my testing tasks are represented by cards. And it's really easy to basically pass or fail a test, right? So if I choose I can click on the details right here, but I can easily pass and fail by clicking on pass, fail, and things like that. So it's much easier, I think, in my opinion, for our testers. Okay, again, I can see the details here. Just pass or fail by one click. DevSuite is a lot clunkier in this regard, but that's what the permutation grid is. Okay. Now, if you didn't have a permutation grid, it would just be identical to what DevSuite has today. So if I come in here, I go to DevSuite, then it's our boring list view, right? So it's not graphically or visually enticing in any way, and it's not easy. I find there's a lot of clicks that you have to do in order to pass or fail a test. So it'll be a list view just like this, right? So, I mean, DevSuite has the capability of, one clicking, but you got to do it, the inline edit it, then you got to do pass or fail like this right here, or disable this guy right here, come in here, and then pass or fail this way. Then you got to hit submit. So there's a lot more clicks inside DevSuite to do certain things, and that's where I'm trying to say. I find Project One a little bit more valuable in productivity and saving your time. Okay, so that's um, basically the gist of this Project One. So again, if you want to try this out, you can easily go to cloud.com, and you can sign up for it. You can evaluate this. You can let us know that you want to use your data instead. We'll set up a test environment, grab your database, um, and test it out for you before we let you try. So I'm going to go ahead and answer questions now. So I hope we have some questions. I believe we do. Um, as always, we're going to have um, the ability to. I mean, I'm always recording these sessions. So after this, we'll send out an email with the links to these webinars. In fact, I'll give you a link to the entire playlist of past webinars to that demonstrates this. Okay. Now, if you want to do a one-on-one session, if you want to see this in more detail, of course, you can talk to your account manager. We'll be happy to sit down with you and discuss your options, or maybe even discuss all of these features in more detail. There's actually quite a bit of questions, so I think I'm running out of time here to answer everything. But let's do this. I'm going to address your questions individually through email. Okay. So again, thank you guys for joining this webinar. Stay tuned for future webinars. I'll send out a link to you guys shortly, and we'll go from there. So I'm sorry, I'm reading another question that just came up. How does the current, okay, let's answer a few. How does the current DevSuite test execution project be ported to this new interface? It's automatic. It's automatic. Again, Project One sits on DevSuite. So you might not have this grid view when you install Project One on top of DevSuite, but this is just a new interface, right? So you would have your list view still. You just don't have this grid, but you can certainly build out a test cycle to get this grid within Project One. So it's automatic. It just sits on top of DevSuite. Let's see. Some of the other questions would be, in development, can you use the product backlog instead? Certainly, I forgot to show that piece. So in the development module right here, coming back into it, you don't necessarily have to assign from requirements. You can have the backlog sitting here. So you would throw all of your tasks, your defects, your stories, you would put it in the backlog, then you would assign by dragging and dropping or right-clicking on these tasks into these sprints. There's also this guy right here where it's a little bit easier to operate. So you can either choose to assign to a sprint from the requirements view, from the backlog, or maybe from any other sprint. So there's a couple of different ways to do so, but we have that option to do so. Answer one last question. Will there also be a new DevSuite admin desktop application to support this, or is it web-based too? Great question. So again, Project One uses DevSuite as a baseline. So DevSuite, whatever you can configure inside DevSuite, as long as it's a feature that's configurable within Project One, you can use the existing DevSuite admin. And again, we're porting all these features over to be web-based in the future. Stay tuned for that. We'll have roadmaps out for you. But not all features currently are inside this web interface, the web admin. Okay, so that's it for today. Again, thank you for joining. We'll send out a link shortly to everybody. And everyone have a nice day.